direct this question now to you. So we see a significant amount of people is not yet connected to the internet. Can you maybe introduce to us a little bit the current projects that you believe are most successful to get the rest of the world connected, not infected, but connected?
Sure. Well, thank you, Marcus. So whether it's the ranging numbers from the 3 billion to the 4.4 billion that still remain to be connected, and also those folks with still quite slow internet speeds, whether it's high-altitude balloons to high-altitude solar-powered platforms, these are some of the things that, given the opportunity, I'd like to describe in my presentation. So,
yeah. I think we all want to see your presentation, so may I invite you to the stage?
Sure, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, good morning, and thank you for the privilege of being here today. Thank you to CyCon, the center, and host Marcus, Nico, etc. What I'd like to do today is to present some of the work by the good people at an institute, the Asia Pacific Institute of Resiliency and Sustainability, that was legislated into existence by Act 229 of the state of Hawaii, and also the Cyber Fellows from the Sense-Making U.S. Pacific Command Cyber Fellows. Okay. So the challenge by CyCon and my host was to attempt to delineate some of the projects that exist, but I'm going to constrain it a tad to the Asia Pacific region because it's complex enough. But you'll see in a second why I want to constrain it to the Asia Pacific, because there's one isolated example, which is an islanded system, which in itself is a complex system. So the balloons are the high-altitude balloons, such as the Project Loon that Google's working on. Some of the UAVs, such as the Solar, are things that Facebook is endeavoring to do. Some of the traditional Predator XPs also carrying different payloads to provide access. And of course, we had the big undersea red cable there that are traditional undersea cable pathways. And the list kind of goes on. You'll see a lot of other assets that's comprised of the Internet of Things, as well as icons representing strategic critical infrastructure, be the light bulb, the water, and etc. So my table of contents, quite simple. I'd like to go over the cyber critical infrastructure in the area of megacities. I'm not sure if you folks had a chance to read this week's New York Times talking about the endeavor to pursue cyber within smart cities. Next, I'd like to address the collaboration on non-traditional cyber threats, because besides the US, besides the Five Eyes, the Nine Eyes, 14 Eyes, et cetera, how do we collaborate among different actors in a coalition type of environment? And then public-private partnerships for interoperability, collective security, and generativity principles, not just security. And then finally, my case study, which is the State of Hawaii Public-Private Partnership Initiative, using Hawaii as an island system, literally speaking, and a living lab. So the first one, cyber critical infrastructure in an era of megacities. Now, this is a typical picture of what the next generation megacity looks like. Very simplistically, in this, what we are approaching, this era of smarter cities, very highly dependent upon food, the energy-water nexus, and obviously connectivity and broadband, high-speed access. I circled two cities in the Asia-Pacific region, Jakarta and Manila. And of course, with the growth of these cities, a lot of digital is being desired out in the rural areas because they actually have to grow the food and provide the resources necessary for the megacities. These are some of the assets as part of the Internet of Things, which also need to be defended. So whether it's a very small UAV monitoring blight or other things on agriculture, or whether sensors on the ground monitoring water and things like that. And as we look at the parameters that have devastating consequences for these megacities, whether it starts at the top from erosion down to the bottom, which is major subsidence, which means that due to aggressive groundwater pumping, now don't forget water is needed to cool the thermoelectric equipment, providing electricity to make sure we have internet access. Sometimes, when we're not careful and don't properly monitor, this is what happens to the land when we do aggressive groundwater pumping. Okay, so that's the backdrop. This is a very trite graph, but I think it makes the point. The demand capacity for internet access is exponential, while our current capacity is basically straight-lined like that. So when we go into a coalition of the willing environment, so putting aside classifications, etc., a couple of the problems, not just the people who don't have internet access, but I'll just pick some of the big megacities. Indonesia, second lowest average speed, Philippines, and interesting point, Hawaii as well. So Hawaii has 8 islands, 5 major ones that we know of. And ironically, Hawaii ranks 48th in the US in terms of internet connection speed. Now, why this is very ironic is that Hawaii has a large population of visitors, tourists. It's a growing area, so in terms of workforce development, it's endeavoring to be the next kind of the place to go for cyber. The Hawaii Broadband Initiative began in 2008, and it's very aspirational. It'd like to be 1 Gbps Ethernet by 2018, but their current capacity actually will be saturated and actually go black within the next 3 years. That's based upon the calculations for all the various needs that I delineated in the past few minutes. And the Trans-Pacific cable is approaching end of life, so that's a problem, and that's in the mid-2020s. And in terms of the rural areas, by US law, there's a Rural Electrification Act of 1935. If it's a underserved or unserved area, it is the federal government's responsibility to bring internet access and electricity out to these areas. So, but to bring internet access with one component, we also need electricity as well. Current physical security is problematic. There's a lot of copper and fiber thefts. And of course, to protect critical infrastructure, it furthers the need to have a further broadband capacity because we need streaming video to surveil the critical infrastructure itself. So moving on to just a quick couple minutes on public-private partnership initiatives. We take a look at a lot of the projects. These are some of the high-altitude platforms. Here we have the Project Loon Balloon. Here we have a lot of the traditional satellites and microsatellites, which have been nicely touched upon in various presentations throughout this venue, and by which I've learned a great deal, as I always do in these venues. And then we have the prototypical undersea cable map. So, again, presentation of all these assets, and somehow, some way, through some public-private partnership initiative, they all have to interoperate together. And whether it's my colleague who presented the red team, my colleague, the firefighter, I'm thankful to say I am a retired firefighter, who very similar reminds me of my colleagues from the blue team, and consider me in this presentation to be a member of the green team on resiliency and sustainability. So how do these interoperate? How do we pay for it with limited budgets? How do we kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone? And that's what I'd like to touch upon quickly. So leading into my case study. So don't forget, Hawaii ranks 48th in the United States in terms of internet connectivity. And the irony is that here we have Hawaii, the island chain, the most isolated island chain on the globe. And here's a larger picture. And it is also home to US Pacific Command, which also is the home of Pearl Harbor. Now, you would think that we have the best connectivity of all here in Pearl Harbor. This is the base, the launch pad for the White House rebalance toward the Asia Pacific. So being number 48 is kind of ironic. So when we take a look at the PACOM area of responsibility, 50% of the world's population, 2 of the 3 largest economies, and a large military force there. So here we go back to the cable. Now don't forget, the cable itself is fundamentally worthless without electricity. And my colleague discussed SCADA in his presentation. So did you know that between 2008 and 2011, there were 33 power disruptions, which also means that 33 instances where internet connectivity was problematic. And the most recent one was on December 5th, 2013. So as you drive around the island, this is what the critical infrastructure looks like. And as we drive around the islands of other strategic allies, this is what the critical infrastructure looks like. Okay, so sense and respond. When the electricity goes out, the water also shuts off. The water pumps don't work. And when the water pumps don't work, raw sewage gets discharged, but also there's no water to cool the thermoelectric equipment, which in turn powers the internet access. So we address these issues. This is Admiral Locklear at the World Economic Forum addressing these issues of strategic critical infrastructure. And perfect storm scenarios are obviously what we're all concerned about. So let me just present a natural case first before I move on to more sophisticated measures. So here we have Hurricane Iniki Category 4 storm, and for that storm we have flooding. We have to mobilize military resources, in this case the National Guard, and what they're doing is helping the citizenry, deploying convoys to bring necessary materials, medicines, water, food to the citizens, and also provide security, particularly during blackout conditions. Okay. So how do we get the electricity back up? It's by linemen like this. Now don't forget, Hawaii is an archipelago, island chain, as many island chains in the Asia Pacific. And these, in this case, we have to mobilize the helicopters, deploy the linemen among the various islands. That means prioritization. Communications is key. Sense and respond is central. So we take a look at one of these boxes that exist at the various substations around key electrical installations, which are also nexus points for internet access. And let me just take the SCADA EMS issue for 1 second. SCADA EMS is in the industrial control system world what we consider to be little data. Big data is something called phaser measurement units, or synchrophasers, is how we're really looking at things. And this presents a world of additional threat vectors. For in the big data world, such as in Hawaii, Pearl Harbor, what happens when we typically have a blackout? How do we provide extra load to the island? You could bring in an aircraft carrier, plug in a submarine, but when you plug in a submarine or an aircraft carrier, does that generate a signature in the area of big data when you have phaser measurement units? And that's an interesting phenomenon. So moving on, how do we prioritize getting the electricity back up to bring our communications back up? We have prioritization of electrification. Supermarkets, faith-based organizations, financial networks. Anywhere on this list do you see internet access? Not really, not yet. Okay, so it's an issue. So we want to be smart. So the cyber multi-threaded programmers that we have, CUDA, C for NVIDIA, as we tackle how do we get sense and respond and improve this, we take a look at digital media asset contribution. And here we have a query center, clustering histograms, and a lot of the machine-generated rules, we use the classic litmus test of milk or wine. Does it sour like milk or does it improve like wine? And we do brittleness testing. There's lots of tools like Seasoft that are out there that are phenomenal for this. So let me quickly go through what this roughly looks like. And as we have digital media asset contribution, we have something that we're very good at. Here are some pictures of sparks on lines. Now, if there's sparks on lines, most probably it's a fault location. Now, we're very good at a couple things when it comes to video analytics. We're very good at color histograms, primordial shape recognition, and texture recognition. So we can use high-performance computing. Now, don't forget, in the world of computing, we want to push compute to the data. So for the PACOM AOR, our high-performance computing center sits at Maui, which is the closest point to the data source. Okay. So as we move on, we have lots of contribution assets. Blue means well-provenance pedigree sources. Pink means potential disinformation, misinformation, which we have to carefully cull through. So we put it through the 5V tests. Is the volume consistent? Is the variety consistent? Is the velocity consistent? And is the value of veracity pretty good? So as we take a look at this, we take a look at the green team perspective. So the red team, blue team typically takes a look at the predefined aperture. The green team has to look way beyond strategically. So here in this case, the Hawaiian Islands are in the center. I just laid down the underground terrain for the Pacific Ocean, and we see the big trench up near Alaska, and it's called the Aleutian Trench. Now, the significance of that is that every day there's a lot of earthquakes near Alaska, and these earthquakes typically will cause massive devastation like this. And if I back up one screen, this is actually Hawaii, the big one of 46. So Hawaii's additional threat vector is this big earthquake, tsunamis that may come from the Alaska region, hence the widened aperture. The key asset to prevent against this is a tsunami warning buoy. Now, I just, out of curiosity, how many people in this room are cyber defenders for tsunami warning buoys? Exactly, same thing back in Hawaii. There are none, really. Now, the key thing is that if you spoof a buoy, the standard operating procedure for the electrical grid operator is to shut down the grid. And there's currently no cyber defenders. Interesting. Okay. So as we use this isomorphic problem and go through, query center once again, in about the next 5 seconds, I'll get to the digital media asset contribution on the various aerial assets, satellite, high-altitude balloons, high-altitude platforms to take pictures of all these buoys, and crowd contributed, of course. So on the left, we have buoys that are untethered, unmoored. In the kind of second one from the right, we have vandalism. And worse, the one on the very right, the sensor array is purely stolen, so the data's gone. Because, so it's an issue, because once the data's gone, we can't get it back. So applying the same thing, blue means well-provenance pedigreed, red means potential disinformation, misinformation for whatever reason, we have no idea. And then looking on, we have a temporal analysis span put right there. And here's the key item. We always look for critical point failure. So we have a 25 to 30% buoy failure rate, 60% failure from mooring issues, 10% from vandalism. Net for Hawaii In some areas, up to 70% failure, which means that we're only relying upon a few strategic buoys, which are undefended, to monitor Hawaii. So, the National Research Council of the National Academies has called for a buoy replacement strategy, meaning higher resolution big data needed. Now, the spoofing of buoys, again, why have more sophisticated means, such as the ones you may read about in the press on the right-hand side in that little caption, when you can simply spoof a buoy? Now, many of you may not know this, but for a lot of the buoys that we have, you can literally pick up a phone number, dial a 1-800 buoy number, and get a barometric pressure, temperature, all this wealth of information right online. Can you do a DDoS attack? Absolutely. So, more sophisticated means are the jammers GPS satellite simulators, which can spoof the UAV GPS receivers, etc. And this is more sophisticated. So overall, and here we have more GPS clock spoofing, because quite frankly, if you do GPS clock spoofing, you have no way of doing forensic analysis at the industrial control system level. So the mitigating factor is localized edge analytics, where we can collect over time historical temperatures, humidity, precipitation, barometric pressure, wind illumination, etc. So when we rethink defense in depth, at least for Western society, we can think NOAA, was National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, and the ICS Industrial Control System. They're all CERTs, Computer Emergency Response Teams, that can all work together to think isomorphically against GPS spoofing. So that's one approach vector that we've been using, we have attempted to use. Let me put it this way. So all these assets somehow have to be interoperable and work together. So let me give you a quick classical 101 on buoys. So here we have a typical profiling buoy, conductivity, temperature, pressure, salinity, density, and it can submerge over a 10-day window. And when it goes up, don't forget the theft of the buoy. So how do we compensate for that? We want to do a burst transmission up to the birds in the sky. And the birds in the sky, and now in 2015, there's a commercialization of the UAV space. So birds in the sky with UAVs. Okay, great, sounds really good, but here's a problem. If you take a look at the UAVs, they use Ku band right now. You're basically moving to Ka band for higher data throughput. Ka band is the same thing for next generation birds in the sky, whether it's big satellite or microsatellite. Ka band, wonderful, additional frequency ranges, demand for cellular backhaul, which is the next 4.4 billion who need this internet access, demand for streaming video, and of course, higher data rate at a lower price per bit. These are all wonderful things. Here's the problem, it's subject to rain fade. And most of Hawaii's is tropical. Same things in other regions. Africa's a third tropical, Asia Pacific, a lot of precipitation. So the downlink dissipation 3 to 10 times, uplink dissipation up to 400 times. So how does that affect, when we have most of it in the tropical regions, how does it affect our ability to respond at the speed of threat? Cyber, machine speed, hemispheric defense, 150 milliseconds. How is that degraded by this paradigm? Very interesting. So when you add on cyber, correlation versus causation, no idea why. But why is the number of cyber attacks? There's about 1 million on the US Navy per year. Why is there more attacks when it rains? Kind of interesting. So here's a proposed Southeast Asia US submarine cable going to Hawaii, because don't forget, end of life in 2020, saturation point, etc. But when we take a look at some of the other archipelagos in the Asia Pacific, there's a lot of islands. Let's look at the end caps to the undersea cable. Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia. Now, at Indonesia, so this is all part of the US SCA cable. Now, Indonesia happens to use a very specific turnkey subcontractor, which will remain unnamed on the stage, but that subcontractor is specifically cited in the US Intelligence Congressional Report for us not to use. Don't forget, this cable is being done by the state of Hawaii, and there's federal issues at hand. So public-private partnerships is kind of, everyone working together is kind of central. 1,000% increase for smart grid satellite bandwidth requirements, exponential increase for smarter cities, smarter devices, etc. And don't forget, for a lot of the archipelagos, we have seismic monitors, which are processed in other areas, move things around. And we have 1,000 times for next generation buoy system requirements due to very good, from the BP oil spill, we learned a lot about smooth particulate hydrodynamic modeling, high fidelity, high granularity, etc. So, and with the UAV space commercialization, big increase. So here's all these assets. Again, somehow they all have to be interoperable. But if we look at this from a defense in depth methodology and just look at the landscape for 1 second, it's very interesting. So we have Google at play, we have Facebook at play. Google's doing the Project Loon high altitude balloons. Facebook is favoring the solar power high altitude UAVs, which is basically 20 kilometers up, still in the stratosphere. But this is not in the microsatellite range or in the satellite range, which is much higher. Now, balloons, basically you can burst with a fingernail, okay? The UAVs, which are solar powered, are quite good, but there's an operation maintenance tail from a budget perspective. If you use a traditional Predator XP, also very good, but basically $20 million a pop, plus operation maintenance, plus piloting, et cetera. So as you look at the econometric framework, and then you compare it to the undersea cable, which can run $350 to $600 to $800 million, and then with all the supply chain end caps for different turnkey subcontractors that may or may not be on a nation state's do not work with list, it becomes a very interesting environment. But take a look at this holistic picture and then ask yourself the question, do we have cyber defenders for all these different assets, which are all constituent components of the Internet of Things, ranging from the buoys that we mentioned, to GPS spoofing, to spoofing on these high altitude balloons, and then we look at the satellites versus microsatellites. The lead up, ramp up time for the big satellites are 10 to 15 years, big money. How do we do the patch Tuesdays on those? Okay, so microsatellites, much faster deployment, much cheaper, and every 2 to 3 years, still not a perfect scenario. So I'm not advocating for any one thing. Actually, I think all these things for the future of cyberspace operations are quite good, because one of the central mantras in cyber is what? Species diversification to avoid transitive closure. So there's different constituent components of different species diversification can be a invaluable asset for cyberspace operations. So with that, I'd like to thank you and field any questions at this time.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Chan. Questions from the audience? Well, I wonder now you brought up the different options we have to bring internet to the people. So you develop a next generation of buoys, so they are getting stolen, and with cables anyway in the sea, we have the problem of maybe a Chinese fish trawler just by mistake dropping his anchor. Don't you see that the future is really the UAV and the satellite scene? So a satellite is not so easy to steal.
Great point, Mark. It's not so easy to steal, but as our colleagues have pointed out, we really can't control space debris, and NASA only monitors a very small component of the space debris that exists. If a nation state decides to, either it's a degradation, orbital decay, or debris that exists from a natural explosion or from a man-made explosion, that debris may puncture any satellites at time, and basically a 400 million asset is taken offline. Microsatellites are much cheaper. And again, it is definitely one layer in the defense and methodology for cyberspace. So yes, it's very high on the list.
Okay. Yep, if there is not any more questions, then thank you very much for your presentation. And my last question actually goes to all the panelists, which I would like you to briefly comment. So this is my question is, if someone would actually ask you, how would cyberspace look like in 10 years from now, so in the year of 2025, what would you answer him? Maybe start with Dr. Teller.
Good question. If you would have asked me how cyberspace would look like in 2015, 10 years ago, yeah. I think I would have gave answer which would not entirely fit to what we say today. So it's really hard to predict, but I think that we will see significant advances in connecting more and more people with higher bandwidth, more usage of the internet, of the normal end users. For example, look at today how many people are shopping in the internet, even products which I could not imagine 20 years ago that someone would shop, for example, shoes in the internet. So new concepts of using the internet will be developed, and security problems will still be there. They will still be massive, and we simply have to work all together, all nations together, to find solutions for those security problems, to still have a usable internet in 10 years from now.
Thank you. Dr. Esser, how do you see cyberspace in 10 years?
Well, I would support the statement that we too have good job security for the next 10 years. I think what we can't escape, first thing we can't escape, I think, is Industry 4.0. So having all the production industry using IP as a protocol, being connected to each other, I think this will have huge implications on us. The other thing I'm a bit, well, still curious about that is home automation. I think we won't be able to avoid that. I think in most countries today, the utilities are under obligation to deploy smart meters whenever they deploy a new line, and I think this will be an interesting scenario. I see huge advantages for us as citizens. I see huge threats. So I think this summarizes it from my side.
A lot of work for us to do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Professor Chan, connectivity everywhere on this planet. Where do you see us 10 years from now?
And just to extrapolate upon my colleague's point, it's going to be a multi-transmission environment. So just on the point of energy, if you have rooftop solar, it's no longer a one-way transmission. Now the people who have rooftop solar can sell back to the electric utility. There's this presumption that providing just a mobile access is good enough. But as we take a look at, let's say, the next billion in Africa, the question is whether it's a Project Loon, kind of a Titan aerospace UAV platform, et cetera. The issue is not just the mobile banking, e-health on the mobile phone, it's about their workforce development, their jobs. So if they need that internet access for their agriculture, et cetera, where to sell the fish, they need these multi-device access. It's going to become more complex, and it's a wide spectrum of cyber things to think about.
Mr. Nicholas, in 10 years, we have the Internet of Everything, and what comes next?
Yeah. So I think as security expert, usually you are a bit pessimistic, so I hope I'm wrong, but if you ask anyone in charge of a country on the infrastructure and you put too many trucks on a bridge over and reaching the capacity of the bridge, most probably you will end up in jail or be in trouble. I thought before Professor Chan's presentation that the best way to shut down the internet is to give a free subscription to Netflix to everyone. Now I will look at the boy on a different way. So I think, unfortunately, awareness and understanding how critical internet is in terms of driving a country and controlling your infrastructure is a key issue that we need to tackle if we want to have a future in the internet.
Thank you. So interesting times we live in, interesting challenges for our research, for the industry, and also for the governments and the military. And I hope we can discuss these things together again. Not with me, this will be my last CyCon, but you are invited to come back again next year. And please, we will have a call for papers. Devote yourself, commit yourself, help us to develop cyberspace of the future together. So now it's my turn to say thank you. Thank you, first of all, to our panelists.
Thank you.
Dr. Teller, thank you for being available on such short notice.